Welcome to Thailand Horror Story. To everyone listening at home, do any of you often say this phrase, "Let's go home"? Everyone, let's go home? If you or someone you know often says things like that, I'd like you to listen closely to this episode. And if you know a friend who says things like this, share this clip with them. This is the story of two men who decided to take a fishing trip together, starting in Nakhon Ratchasima and planning to continue on to Nakhon Nayok afterward. After finishing up in Nakhon Ratchasima, one of them suggested, "Let's go home," and that's when an unexpected and terrifying event took place. Before we dive into our scary story, we would like to ask everyone to like and subscribe to support us in continuing to bring you more terrifying tales in the future. This story is an experience that Taylor and his friend had. It happened not too long ago. Taylor and his friend, who is named Boyle, share a passion for fishing. So they decided to go on a fishing trip together for about 4 days in another province. This trip was organized quite spontaneously. They discussed it in the morning and planned to set off that same evening. They talked about starting in Nakhon Ratchasima, intending to move on to Nakhon Nayok afterward. After finalizing their plan, where to go, the destination, and the details, they headed home to prepare. They each went their separate ways to pack clothes, gear, and fishing equipment. When the agreed time of 8 p.m. arrived, Boyle rode over to Taylor's house, and the two of them set off from Prakanburi, heading toward Nakhon Ratchasima. The trip took over 3 hours, with occasional stops to rest, a few wrong turns, and some getting lost, which delayed them. By the time they finally arrived in Nakhon Ratchasima, it was nearly midnight, getting close to 1 a.m. Since the trip was so last minute, they hadn't booked a hotel or anything in advance. They figured they could just find somewhere to stay along the way since there were plenty of hotels and resorts, so it wouldn't be too difficult to find a place to sleep. However, after inquiring at 2 or 3 places, they discovered that everything was either fully booked, had no vacancies, or only had single beds. Beds so small they'd have to squeeze together. It seemed they had come on a night when some kind of meeting or conference was happening, so all the reasonably priced accommodations were booked. They continued searching for a place to stay until around 2 a.m. exhausted and not wanting to drive far to find another hotel. They decided, how about we just sleep in the car? At least that way we save on hotel costs and time, and we'll be heading out to fish in just a few hours anyway. So they shifted their goal from finding a hotel to locating a rest stop where they could sleep in the car. They drove around until they found a rest area with about 4 or 5 other cars parked, making the place feel relatively safe. They found an empty spot a bit removed from the other vehicles and decided to park there for the night. Without looking around much, they parked, seeing an open space and pulling in directly. After turning off the engine, they noticed something in the distance, about 4 spaces away, a large Bodhi tree. The tree was massive, and at its base were various statues and figurines. Seeing this gave them an uneasy feeling, as the atmosphere around the tree felt strange and eerily heavy. Since they both believed in superstitions, they thought it might not be the best spot to stay. They decided it would be better to park closer to the other cars rather than remaining by the Bodhi tree. So, as Taylor reached to start the car again, intending to move to a different parking spot, as soon as he started the car, Boyle asked, "Hey, why are you starting the car? Where are you going? This spot's fine." Taylor nodded toward the Bodhi tree without saying much, hinting, yeah, I think I'd rather move somewhere else. But Boyle quickly interrupted, sounding annoyed. "Oh, come on, no need. We'll be here only for a few hours. Then it'll be morning. Just park and let's sleep, Taylor felt conflicted. He was scared, but Boyle was insisting. So he thought, fine, if you're okay with it, then we'll stay here. He turned off the engine again, cracked the windows a little, and got ready to sleep. Before lying down, he faced the Bodhi tree and put his hands together in a respectful Y, silently asking the spirits for permission to sleep there. But as he was about to say something to the Bodhi tree, Boyle noticed and asked, "Hey, Taylor, who are you praying to?" Taylor turned to his friend and replied, "Oh, nothing. I'm just asking for permission to sleep here." Boyle laughed, obviously amused, and teased him. "Who are you asking permission from? It's just a tree. Are you crazy?" Taylor smiled slightly, not responding, as this was a personal belief of his. Whenever he slept somewhere unfamiliar, he always thought it best to ask for the local spirit's blessing. To him, it was better than not asking at all. He knew it was his belief alone and didn't expect Boyle to understand or believe. After that, Taylor and Boyle reclined their seats and went to sleep. But strangely, Taylor found it hard to sleep that night, even though he was exhausted from driving. He kept drifting in and out of sleep. Meanwhile, Boyle, sleeping right next to him, was out cold, even drooling with his mouth wide open. Taylor tried to force himself to sleep, but after a while, he started hearing the sound of someone coughing near the car. A dry, raspy cough. At first, he didn't think much of it, but as time passed, the coughing continued. He opened his eyes to look around, checking if anyone was nearby, but saw only darkness. There was no one close to the car, and other cars were parked a good distance away. He thought he might have misheard or that Boyle was the one coughing in his sleep. After looking around and hearing nothing more, he decided to lie back down. About 10 minutes later, though, he heard another sound, like someone tapping on the window with their fingernails. The tapping came from his right, the driver's side window. Then, just moments after the tapping began, he felt the car dip slightly, as if someone had climbed into the truck bed at the back. Startled, Taylor sat up quickly and looked back, thinking someone might be sneaking onto the truck. Through the small rear window that separated the truck bed from the cabin, he saw someone kneeling in the bed, staring straight at them. The figure looked as though they were trying to peer inside, watching what the two of them were doing. The moment Taylor caught sight of this person in the truck bed, he shouted and shook Boyle awake, yelling, "Boyle, wake up!" Boyle woke up groggily around 4 a.m., confused and annoyed. "What are you waking me up for?" he grumbled, squinting at Taylor. Taylor pointed to the back of the truck, saying, "Boyle, there's someone sitting back there." But when he pointed, the truck bed was empty. There was no one there. Boyle looked at him, even more annoyed now, and said, "It's 4 in the morning. Why are you waking me up for nothing?" Without explaining further, Taylor just started the car, not caring if Boyle believed him or not, and drove off from the rest stop. As he drove, Boyle asked, "Hey, where are you going? It's not even morning yet." Taylor answered shortly, "I'm heading to a gas station." Boyle muttered, "Fine, whatever, and while you're at it, maybe grab some cough drops. I listened to you coughing all night long." Taylor froze, his face turning pale. He replied, "Boyle, I wasn't coughing." Boyle looked puzzled, saying, "If it wasn't you, then who was it? A ghost?" At that, Taylor explained everything he'd just experienced. Boyle listened, but seemed unconvinced. "You were just seeing things, Taylor. There's nothing out here. I slept perfectly fine without seeing a single thing." After Boyle dismissed it, Taylor didn't press the matter, letting the experience fade without further discussion. They reached a blue gas station as dawn was breaking. They parked, stretched, and went inside to freshen up, change clothes, and grab breakfast. Once they'd eaten and gotten ready for the day, they prepared to head to their fishing spot. This time, Boyle took the wheel while Taylor rested, trying to catch up on the sleep he'd lost the night before. Their fishing spot was a secluded area only locals in Nakhon Ratchasima knew about, passed down by word of mouth. It was quite a distance from where they had started. When they finally arrived, Taylor had managed to get a decent nap. The spot was a large lake, surrounded by thick vegetation. Signs of previous visitors were evident, trails where people had cleared the grass to fish. A bit further off, they could see another pickup truck parked, likely another group out to fish, which made the place feel a little less eerie. The two of them split up to fish in different spots. Around 5 p.m., Taylor heard Boyle shouting from about 40 to 50 meters away, "Hey, let's head back. We still have to find a place to stay before it gets dark." "Let's go." Taylor shouted back, all right, let's go." But he couldn't help feeling uneasy about Boyle's choice of words. Taylor, having heard many ghost stories, remembered how people were always warned that when going home, especially in pairs, they should call each other by name instead of just saying, "Let's go home." Saying it too broadly was thought to invite others to follow them back, perhaps even unwanted spirits. He was uncomfortable, recalling the strange events of the previous night and fearing they might be bringing something back with them. With a nagging sense of unease, Taylor resolved not to think too much about it, even though he couldn't shake the feeling that they might encounter something strange again that night. At that moment, Taylor quickly packed up his fishing gear and waited by the truck for Boyle. When Boyle finally arrived, Taylor said, "Boyle, are you crazy? Yelling like that in the middle of the forest? Who calls out like that to go home? You're going to bring something back with us." Boyle protested, "I called your phone, but you didn't pick up. I had to yell to get your attention. Don't worry, it's fine. You're overthinking it." Taylor didn't argue further, but silently hoped nothing strange would happen that night. Afterward, they gathered all the fish they had caught, about 50 in total, and put them in the ice chest they'd brought. Then they got into the truck and set out to find a place to stay for the night. They drove for a while until they found a roadside guest house that looked decent, so they decided to pull in. Once they parked, a friendly-looking elderly lady came out to greet them. She asked if they were looking for a place to stay, adding, "We have rooms available. It's 500 baht a night. Are you interested?" Seeing that the price was reasonable and that there was a room available, Taylor and Boyle agreed. "Okay, we'll stay one night, ma'am. We're heading to Nakhon Nayok tomorrow morning," Taylor replied. The lady nodded and said, all right, but I only have a few rooms left. Each room can hold up to 3 people." Taylor quickly replied, "It's just the 2 of us, ma'am. 1 room is enough." After he said that, the lady's expression changed. She paused and looked toward the back of their truck, seeming puzzled. She kept staring at the truck bed with a confused look, as if she saw something unusual there. Noticing her behavior, Taylor asked, "Is something wrong, ma'am?" The lady quickly shook her head and smiled, saying, No, nothing." But even as she spoke, her gaze kept shifting to the truck bed, almost as if she were glancing out of the corner of her eye rather than looking directly. Her attitude changed noticeably after Taylor confirmed there were only 2 of them. She quickly said, 500 baht. Dear, 500 baht. Taylor handed her the money, and she gave them a key, pointing them toward a small cabin. Then, without another word, she turned and walked away, leaving them standing there, confused. She didn't offer to show them to their room or chat further. She just left abruptly. They exchanged puzzled glances but shrugged it off, figuring she must have been in a hurry. They began unloading their things from the truck, and while unpacking, they discussed what to make for dinner with the fish they'd caught. Boyle suggested, "Let's cook up the fish we caught. That way we won't have to go out looking for food." They had brought cooking supplies with them, so Taylor agreed. He offered to go out and grab some beer while Boyle prepared the fish as both a meal and something to snack on. At that moment, as Boyle was cooking, Taylor drove off to a convenience store to buy some beer. The store was a bit far, but once he arrived, he picked up 4 bottles. The store clerk remarked, "For bottles? Huh? Will that be enough for a group as big as yours?" Taylor replied, "That's enough, we're only having a little." "But wait, what do you mean by big group?" The clerk hesitated and then said, "Oh, nothing, sir. Don't worry about it." Carrying his 4 bottles of beer, Taylor returned to his truck, started it up, and headed back to the guest house. The clerk's words replayed in his mind. 4 bottles? Enough for a big group? He wondered if he really looked like someone who could drink a lot. Surely, 2 bottles each for him and Boyle would be enough. When he arrived back at the guest house, he was planning to tell Boyle about the strange comment from the clerk. But as he got out of the truck, he saw Boyle sitting outside the room, nervously smoking and trembling. "Hey, what's wrong with you, Boyle? Weren't you supposed to be cooking the fish?" Taylor asked. Boyle didn't respond, just kept shaking. Taylor, holding the beer, was confused. "What's up with you, man? You didn't cook the fish, didn't prepare anything, and here you are sitting outside, shaking." He then asked, "You still haven't started on the fish?" Just as he was about to head inside to put the beer in the fridge, Boyle suddenly spoke up. "Taylor, don't go in there. Don't go in." "Why not?" Taylor asked, perplexed. Boyle replied, "Whatever's in that room. I don't know where it came from." Taylor was even more puzzled. "What are you talking about, Boyle?" Boyle simply said, "If you want to sleep in there tonight, go ahead. But I'm sleeping in the truck." "Why are you sleeping in the truck?" Taylor asked. "We've already paid for the room. The bed's comfortable." Boyle, still shaking, just muttered, "You'll find out soon enough." Taylor, feeling frustrated, ignored Boyle's strange behavior and went inside to put the beer in the fridge. He then returned to the truck to grab the ice he'd forgotten. When he came back inside, Boyle finally followed him, heading to the kitchen to finish preparing the fish, making soup and setting everything up. When the food was ready, Taylor said, "All right, Boyle, let's eat." They sat down to eat the fish they had prepared and drank the beer. They kept drinking until about 10:30 p.m., stopping early since they planned to leave for Nakhon Nayok at 5 a.m. Boyle went to shower first, and after he finished, he grabbed a pillow and blanket and told Taylor, "I'm gonna sleep in the truck." "Good luck, Taylor." Taylor was confused as Boyle left, wondering why he'd rather sleep in the truck than in a comfortable room. But he didn't dwell on it. As Boyle walked out, Taylor headed into the bathroom to shower. Once he was done, he got ready for bed and turned off the lights, lying alone in the quiet, slightly eerie room. That night, he slept deeply, with no disturbances or strange noises. He even had pleasant dreams, like catching a big fish and celebrating with friends and family. He couldn't remember sleeping this soundly in a long time and thought to himself that it was nice to sleep on a soft bed rather than in the truck. However, At around 4 a.m., he was abruptly woken by loud, frantic banging on the door. "Taylor, Taylor, open the door. Taylor, open up." Hearing Boyle yelling outside, he quickly got up and opened the door. Boyle rushed into the room, visibly shaken, as though he'd seen something terrifying. Taylor asked, "What's going on with you, Boyle?" Boyle, looking panicked and disoriented, blurted out, "The truck bed. It's full of ghosts, man. They're everywhere. All over the truck bed." In disbelief, Taylor asked Boyle what he'd seen. Boyle just pointed out the window toward the truck. Taylor went outside and looked, but there was nothing unusual, just their belongings scattered across the truck bed. Returning inside, he asked Boyle again, "What exactly did you see?" Just then, they both heard a gentle knock on the door. Boyle jumped, and Taylor was startled as well. It was barely past 4 a.m. Who could be knocking at this hour? He cautiously pulled back the curtain to check, and he saw the elderly lady from the guest house standing outside with a flashlight. "Is everything all right?" she asked. "I heard some yelling and thought there might be a problem." Realizing it was only the lady, Taylor opened the door and explained, "No, nothing serious. My friend here had too much to drink and thought he saw ghosts in the truck bed. That's all." The lady's face went pale. Her hand holding the flashlight trembled as she replied, "Young man, may I come inside?" Confused, Taylor let her in. Once inside, the lady looked at them both and said, "You two don't seem all that drunk to me, and your friend here doesn't look like he's seeing things either." "I saw them too." Taylor was stunned. "You saw them?" The lady nodded. "Yes, I saw them earlier in the evening, sitting all over the truck bed. That's why I asked how many people were with you when you arrived. I saw a crowd, men, women, children, even elderly folks, all packed in the truck bed. I wanted to say something, but I was worried you wouldn't stay if I did." Taylor's heart pounded as he asked, "Are you certain? You really saw them?" "Yes," she said. "I saw them clearly. That's why I mentioned that each room can only hold 3 people. I was worried you'd try to fit all those people in one room." Taylor pieced it together, realizing that this might be connected to the fishing trip. Perhaps, in some inexplicable way, they had brought these spirits back with them. The lady then urged, "Wherever you picked them up, take them back to where they belong." Taylor nodded, replying, "Yes, ma'am. I'll take them back tomorrow." After that, Auntie opened the door and left the room. Meanwhile, they all stayed put, not daring to venture outside because it was still dark. So, they decided to wait in the room until morning. While waiting, they asked Boyle what he had encountered last night, trying to get him to share what he had seen. But Boyle wouldn't answer. He simply said he didn't want to talk about it and asked them to drop the subject. So, they remained clueless about what Boyle had experienced that night. As dawn approached and the outside light began to brighten, Taylor went to return the key to Auntie and then got back in the car to drive away. They were heading back to the fishing spot from the previous day to drop someone off. During the drive, Boyle kept his eyes tightly shut the entire way. They drove for about 40 minutes from their accommodation until they reached the fishing spot they'd been at the day before. When they arrived early in the morning, there was no one else there yet, which made the atmosphere feel even more eerie despite the daylight. After they arrived, Taylor told Boyle, "Tell them to get out of the car now. We're here," but Boyle hesitated, refusing to be the one to give the order. He kept saying no, asking Taylor to tell them instead. Taylor insisted, You're the one who invited them. You should be the one to let them out. Boyle finally gave in, climbed out of the car, and pressed his hands together in a respectful Y. There was no incense, no ritual. He simply spoke, saying something like, "For anyone who followed, please return to where you came from." Then, he quickly jumped back into the car, urging Taylor, go, floor it, or the ghost will jump back in with us. Taylor followed his instructions, speeding away. After a while, Taylor asked Boyle, "So, what did you see last night?" Boyle finally began to open up, seeming to feel more at ease now that he had asked the spirits to return. He explained that the first encounter had occurred around 6 p.m., while Taylor was out buying beer. Boyle had been preparing fish at the back of the house. To give some context, the place they were staying was like a daily rental house with 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom, and a back porch where they could cook. Boyle had been preparing the fish outside to avoid making the room smell. Suddenly, he heard the door open, followed shortly by footsteps inside the room. Thinking it was Taylor, he called out, "Taylor, are you back already?" But there was no reply. Boyle thought perhaps Taylor hadn't heard him because the back door was closed. As he continued cleaning the fish, he began hearing strange noises. He heard the sounds of children playing, laughing, and squealing in delight, as if they were running around inside the house. Initially, he thought it might be some kids from another family who had accidentally entered their room by mistake. He was about to peek in and tell them, "Hey, this room's occupied by just me and my friend," but as he looked inside, he saw something terrifying. There, running around in the room, was a small girl with a swollen greenish-purple body and no eyes. She was playing as though she was completely oblivious to him. Shocked by what he saw, Boyle dashed to the front of the house, where a few other guests were sitting on the porch outside their rooms. He was so terrified he didn't dare go back inside until Taylor returned in the car and found him outside, shaking and smoking a cigarette. That explains why Boyle was too scared to sleep in the room. Just the thought of a ghost being in that house was too much for him. He hadn't considered that the ghost might actually be following him, so he hadn't mentioned it to Taylor, fearing it would make him too scared to sleep. When he decided to sleep in the car instead, that was a huge mistake. Boyle continued his story, explaining that when he was in the car, just as he was drifting off, he started to hear voices whispering right next to his ear. He couldn't make out what they were saying, but it was clearly people talking, a lot of people chattering loudly, almost like a marketplace. He described it as feeling like he was lying in the middle of a busy market. At first, because he was drowsy, he didn't think much of it. He could hear the voices but wasn't fully aware enough to realize, "Wait, I'm alone in the car. Why am I hearing other people talking?" As he lay there listening to the chatter, he gradually became more alert, realizing the oddity of the situation. He quickly looked to his left and right, but no one was there. As soon as he sat up, the voices vanished. All he heard was the quiet night. No crickets, not even a single frog croaking. With the silence surrounding him, he lay back down, trying to sleep once more. This time, it was the same as before. Just as he was about to fall asleep, he heard people talking again. But this time, the voices were strange. They sounded like whispers instead. Boyle tried to focus, gathering his thoughts and listening closely to figure out where the whispers were coming from and what they were saying. He discovered that the whispers he heard were saying something like, "We're coming along with you now. We've come too." The moment Boyle heard this, he jolted awake in shock because the voices he heard clearly said, "We're coming along with you. We're all here now." What shocked him even more was that, inside the car, there were now 4 or 5 people sitting tightly packed next to him. There were people sitting beside him and in the back seat, filling the car completely. Even down by his feet, someone was sitting with knees pulled up. At that moment, Boyle was horrified. What had once been an empty car, with him lying there alone, was now filled with numerous figures, tightly squeezed and packed into his small car. He was terrified by what he saw. The people next to him had horribly disfigured faces. Some of them had no eyes. Some looked like they were bloated, as if they had just risen from the water, like decaying corpses. They filled every available space in the car. The most frightening figure of all was the one right by his legs. That one let out a noise, a cry of sorts, and its eyes bulged out. Boyle was so shocked that he started screaming, quickly opening the car door and jumping out. He then turned around to look at the car, checking if those spirits were still there. And as he glanced back at the pickup truck, he saw figures, men, women, children, the elderly, crowded tightly in the back of the truck. It was as if his truck was carrying about 20 to 30 people. He was so frightened that he began banging on the door to his room, shouting until Auntie came to see if there was something wrong. After Boyle finished telling the story, his face had turned pale, looking as if he couldn't take it anymore. Taylor asked him, "So, Boyle, what do you think? Are we still going to Nakhon Nayok?" This question was mostly rhetorical. Taylor already knew that Boyle loved fishing and usually wasn't easily scared. To his surprise, however, Boyle quickly shook his head and said, "Let's go back. I want to go home. I don't want to go anywhere else." Boyle's face showed he was truly done with everything, so they changed their plans and drove home instead. Along the way, Boyle kept complaining of body aches. His legs hurt, then his arms, his shoulders. Eventually, Taylor had to stop at a pharmacy to buy him some pain relievers to make him feel better. After that, Boyle fell silent, responding in monosyllables whenever Taylor tried to engage him in conversation. The atmosphere in the car became tense, mirroring Boyle's somber mood. When they finally arrived back at Boyle's home, Boyle just grabbed his personal bag, leaving all his fishing gear behind. Taylor shouted after him, "Boyle, aren't you taking your fishing rods?" Boyle turned and replied, "No, I don't want them. Take them. I'm done fishing." Taylor was shocked because Boyle was someone who loved fishing, far more than Taylor himself. But seeing Boyle's face, Taylor didn't press the matter, letting Boyle go inside. 3 days later, Taylor called Boyle to invite him over for a meal. But no matter how many times he called, Boyle didn't pick up. The following day, Taylor decided to drive to Boyle's house to return his fishing equipment. When Taylor arrived at Boyle's house, he only saw Boyle's mother. Boyle himself was nowhere to be seen. So Taylor asked her, "Ma'am, where's Boyle? I've been trying to call him, but he doesn't answer." Boyle's mother sighed deeply, her face looking weary, and she explained that ever since Boyle returned, he had locked himself in his room all day, complaining of pains in his arms and legs, unable to get up. She asked, "What did you all do on that trip?" "Boyle doesn't look well at all. Just this morning, I took him to the temple for a blessing, but he doesn't seem any better." Taylor then explained to Boyle's mother what had happened on their fishing trip in Nakhon Ratchasima, that Boyle had accidentally called out inviting spirits to come home with them, and ever since, he believed the spirits had followed him back. After hearing the whole story, Boyle's mother let out a long sigh and said she would have to take Boyle to the temple again and consult with the senior monk on what to do next. After that day, Taylor kept trying to contact Boyle, but could never get through. Whenever he went to Boyle's house, it seemed like it was always a day when both Boyle and his mother weren't home. To this day, Taylor doesn't know what more he can do to help. This was another eerie experience Taylor had encountered. He said it was genuinely chilling. Who would have thought that a simple invitation to go home could trigger such a terrifying series of events? Just imagine lying down in your car, opening your eyes, and seeing ghosts filling every seat. Taylor said he would have completely lost it, especially with that one ghost curled up on the floor making strange noises. It would have left him in total shock. If anyone ever has a similar encounter, staying calm would be incredibly difficult. Experiences like these serve as a reminder, especially for those who casually say, "Let's all go home." Not everyone may realize that when you say, "everyone," spirits nearby might take it as an invitation to follow along. The safest way is to call out each person's name directly. For example, if you're with Boyle, just say, "Boyle, let's go home," instead of saying, "Everyone, let's go." If you're in a group of 4 or 5, calling out names is especially important when in unfamiliar places, where spirits and wandering souls are often present. Perhaps, as with Taylor and Boyle, they may overhear what you say and take it as their cue to follow you home. Taylor's experience with Boyle is a true story, something to think about carefully when listening. If you're a fan of ghost stories, then you're one of us. Just remember, be mindful of what you say, and more importantly, be careful of where you choose to rest for the night, especially if it's the same place where Taylor first saw that lone spirit sitting in the back of the truck in Nakhon Ratchasima. Good luck, and may you not encounter any ghosts. Goodbye.